Why doesn't this cut exist? Not literally, I mean, it's right there. Why doesn't this cut exist more often? The Legends team seems to think that inverted ab crunches are the best option.
Isn't that cute? But it's wrong!
But as a collector, I think inverted ab crunches suck. And it has nothing to do with articulation. I'm Glen, and this is Super Articulated. I understand that from Hasbro's perspective, they have to think about more than just articulation. They have to consider things like safety, marketing, and product development. But here's the thing. And also, I think they're losing money with every single reuse of this super articulated body. The one distinct design flaw it has is that the crotch and the obliques have to be one piece. And that means for characters who have that break in the costume design, like most superheroes do, the obliques have to be painted to match the rest of the torso. And when you're working with a small budget, especially a small deco budget, that actually limits character selection. Now, to be fair, in order to prevent wasting your deco budget on painting these obliques, what they could do is dual inject the two different colors together. But I think that costs even more money. That's actually what's so great about the ball and socket pelvis. The mid-torso and the crotch can be molded in separate, discrete colors. Articulation that naturally lends itself to the design of most superhero costumes. The Vulcan body has a torso piece count of about 10. When a character has a super articulated torso with that inverted ab crunch diaphragm combo, 3, 4, that actually only increases piece count by 1. However, with a diaphragm and ball and socket pelvis combo, that increases piece count to 11 as well. Or about 11. I'm not gonna crack one of these open to check. But with a ball and socket pelvis, there's a design choice that can be made that can't be replicated on the inverted ab crunch. Piece count can actually decrease when you make that mid-torso a solid piece of PVC. That actually decreases piece count to the same level as Vulcan. With a ball and socket pelvis, the 6 main pieces that make up this torso, only 4 have to be sonic welded together. And sonic welding is the process of vibrating 2 pieces of plastic together until they form a bond, literally. And that takes manufacturing time. Maybe only a few seconds per part, but still. But turning that middle torso joint into a single piece does increase the weight of the torso. But then you have to ask what actually costs more money, this extra weight or the increased assembly time to sonic weld 6 pieces together. Interchangeable parts are really valuable for collectors. I would wager that they increase perceived value more than the actual value that it takes to include them. And on Wolverine here, if you made his torso a single piece, made it removable, you could maybe include an interchangeable mid-torso that's battle damaged or something. And that is not a design choice that you can make with the inverted ab crunch. Think back at all of the hyper-specific molds that use the ball and socket pelvis specifically. I can think of classic Luke Cage, first appearance Wasp, and like every single Jean Grey for some reason. Now think about if that ball and socket pelvis had just been standardized throughout the line, Hasbro wouldn't have had to make those hyper-specific molds that they barely reused. That almost feels like a criminal waste of your budget that could have gone to figures that actually needed it. The inverted ab crunch retains the structural integrity of the crunch and waist swivel. The way that they sonic weld those pieces together, they are not coming apart. It's the same on inverted ab crunches. However, on an articulation scheme like Wolverine, that mid-torso is also sonic welded together, which means it's not coming apart. The only problem is that, from what I've read of the United States regulation on toys, when you're marketing an action figure line as 4+, I don't think that matters, unless that is a requirement of some other country or the internal safety standards at Hasbro. Have you ever seen that video that was popular a couple years ago where a guy would line up competing bicycle helmets and smash them with a hammer until he got to his and the hammer would just bounce right off? It's a great video for marketing their helmets, but you don't want that to happen. When you get in a crash, you want your helmet to take all of that impact damage, otherwise it goes straight into your fucking brain. Now the reason I say that is when you take a figure like this that has assembled permanence and you drop it enough, all of that kinetic energy is going into the plastic itself. Now, I'm not saying that making this mid-torso piece into a solid piece of PVC plastic will prevent that, but if you design the figure to come apart, what it's going to do when it hits the floor is come apart. It spreads out that kinetic energy when it pops apart instead of going into the actual plastic. At least that's how I understand it. Now, I think from a marketing perspective, the inverted ab crunch has some merit. The industry standard has decided that the ball and socket pelvis is the standard. But then marketers on the Marvel Legends team can say, oh, this is new, this is different, this is super articulated. They can treat it as part of the brand, which makes sense. It's been around for 10 years. But I think longtime collectors know that that shit was straight up lifted from DC icons, which had this point of articulation years before. And hey, on all their female figures too. Wow, when you look at the actual history of Marvel Legends, go back to that first series of figures, like on Captain America here, you'll see that he has a diaphragm joint and a primitive version of that ball and socket pelvis. That is your brand. I just realized I had my AirPods in, but for the sake of continuity, I'm going to keep them in. But I don't want to say that the ball and socket pelvis is the only solution to the inverted ab crunch. So I've come up with 3 different alternatives that I'd like to explore. Alternative 1. Let's just go back to waist cuts and ab crunches. I'm not even really going to elaborate why that's a bad idea. But it actually has some range of motion that Beast can't do. Beast can't crunch forward and then rotate. Not really. That seems like a really simple movement that is just not possible with this articulation scheme. I'm not sure there are many poses that would actually utilize that, except for maybe a high kick, which looks kind of silly from a certain perspective. Alternative 2. Reinvert that ab crunch and replace it with a ball and socket pelvis, just like early G.I. Joe figures. That completely negates the problem of crunching forward and being unable to rotate. The ball and socket below the crunch actually accommodates that. Just like waist cuts and just like the ball and socket pelvis, it would accommodate discretely molded colors. It would also always allow logos to be in alignment between 2 pieces. But just like how inverted ab crunches kind of break up torsos on male figures in a weird way, reverting back to the waist cut and crunch and the ball and socket pelvis and crunch would just look too weird on female figures. And finally, alternative 3. You know how the Maximum Spider-Man can get kind of a crazy range of motion with its inverted ab crunch? Well, if you wanted to keep the benefits of the ball and socket pelvis and that ab crunch, you could do something like this. This is the reason why this figure has been on the table this entire video. It might be a little hard to see. This Spider-Man 2 figure that I got from KB Toys in 2004 for like $50 has a diaphragm joint, has a crunch, and has a proto ball and socket pelvis. He can do that. And he can twist, but it can't really like crunch. You have to rely on the diaphragm joint and the... I'm not about to cry. Fuck me. I can't believe I just fucking did that. On camera, at least. Fuck. Okay. Okay, alright. So what does that do? That increases piece count to 12, so not very economically viable. It does increase range of motion, but then shit like that can happen. I had more to say about that configuration, but I think we're done. Oh, 10% of my fucking AirPods? So ultimately, I think the best alternative is the ball and socket pelvis. It has the same number of pieces as the super articulated scheme. You change one thing about it, it actually has the same amount of pieces as the Vulcan body. It accommodates discreetly molded colors. It's less likely to fucking break on you when you drop it, or it can have the same assembled permanence as Beast. I'm not even gonna try. And you now have a choice to make that middle torso piece into an interchangeable part to increase playability. And instead of being an articulation scheme that was stolen from DC Icons, you can look back at Series 1 of Marvel Legends and find the exact same setup. But you know what? I lied earlier. It is about articulation, all right? The ball and socket pelvis contributes to the rotational, flexion, and lateral range of motion of that diaphragm joint, which the inverted ab crunch just can't. And another great aspect about its design is that if the crotch and the mid-torso are two distinct pieces, that means the crotch can be molded in a softer PVC so that when legs articulate upwards, they can get out of the way of the sculpt. We no longer have to deal with drop-down hips that fucking break all the time. The inverted ab crunch is old. It's archaic. It is out of date. The ball and socket pelvis has become the industry standard for a reason. You are losing money every single time you use the super articulated scheme. Extract the most amount of value that you can out of these figures by using the ball and socket pelvis. In the comments, let me know if there are any other possible alternatives to the inverted ab crunch that I didn't think of. I tried to make it so in this video that I wasn't just arguing for ball and socket waists from the perspective of a whiny collector, although it probably ended up coming off like that. I wanted to frame it as not necessarily beneficial to the consumer, but beneficial to Hasbro. So let me know if I did that effectively. If you like me breaking my precious childhood fucking toys, subscribe, because I'm probably gonna do it again. I've only had that for 22 years. Like the video. I'm Glenn, and this is Super Articulated. There's nothing in there. Oh! So instead of the butterfly joints being soft PVC and pegging into the torso itself, it looks like what they use on the waist swivel, sort of discs that pull everything together. I guess after 22 years, the sonic welding didn't hold up.